Welcome.
Hallo zusammen, ich grüße Sie, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren.
Good morning. I would like to greet you all, ladies and gentlemen, to speak about the impact of digitalization and digital skills that have also been conducted in Germany in this project. The viewpoint of managers and the staff were equally important. We therefore interviewed also some institutional representations from the Entrepreneurs Association as the unions. There were different publications from the Entrepreneurs Associations and the unions that we used for our study, as also the case study that we will introduce in our presentation. The two AIRBUS in Europe, Hamburg and Bremen, were selected for Germany. AIRBUS is an industrial production company, a multinational company that employs 46,000 employees, almost half of the German employees in this field. We have not only manufacturing plants, but also plants for the final assembly. This site is the second in importance in Germany and is responsible for the integration of wings systems. Some of the AIRBUS pieces have been produced in Hamburg and Bremen for more than 20 years. That is to say, there are production processes that are quite senior, and therefore the opinion of the management explains that they were always subject to digitalization. The employees, nevertheless, state the importance of the digitalization for the future of the company. In the surveys to the management and to the staff, they think that this is the reason why AIRBUS was a very right case to study the impact on digitalization. In January and February, we interviewed 3 managers and a union representative of Hamburg and Bremen. We also interviewed a representative of the German Federation of Union. We were going to have an interview with a representative from IG Metall, but did not finally take place. Initially, it was planned to have some discussion or focus groups to collect the position from the consumers, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this was finally not possible. All the stakeholders in the study guarantee that the topic of those focus groups will be subject to the interviews that we were going to conduct in our case study, and therefore always with the idea of including the positions from the social agents and to be able to have an access to the general population input. So we included surveys that took place in the past. The employers were represented through the Federal Association of the Employers Associations in Germany and the unions through the German Confederation of Unions. IG Metall, that is the union that represents the metal and steel workers and is therefore the union present in AIRBUS. According to the representatives of the Works Council, AIRBUS employees, almost all of them are members of the IG Metall union. IG Metal Union.
Die Veränderungen der Digitalisierung betreffen in der
The changes as a consequence of digitalization in the labor market and also the impact on retribution and the skills and competences needed for those positions in the future was one of the subjects analyzed in our study. Also the greater geographical mobility and the role of social agents in collective bargaining, the change and the impact of digitalization could be summarized in 10 points. First, the level of training, especially the capacity for analytic thinking, will be even more important in the future. What is important here is to get a higher level of knowledge. It's not enough only with having more and more degrees, and the employers were quite critical in this regard. One of them said that there is an inflation on degrees that might be misleading. It might seem to credit a higher level of training, but in practical terms, this is not always the case. This is something that was not applied in Germany equally. In Germany, there is a federal state, and there is a real education gap between or among the different states, which is a real challenge when we deal with digitalization.
Zu sehen ist ein starker Anstieg der Absolventinnen und Absolventen von Fachhochschulen und Universitäten.
In 1995 and 2016, there was a strong increase in the number of graduates in technical higher education. The number of graduates has doubled in the last few years. The reason is that there was a reduction in the level of academic achievement, so that there was a greater number of students. This high number of graduates generates a positive global impression of the education level in Germany. This might seem to be beneficial for all, for the graduates because they get their diplomas, and also the universities because they get more state funding, and also the different lenders. But the companies at company level, the recruitment processes found great difficulties in really correctly assessing the potential of the candidate. A degree on its own does not provide enough information. While in the past the diploma was enough, now we need to do in-depth interviews in order to guarantee that the future employees really have the necessary knowledge. That's why we say we need to increase the real level of knowledge and not only a degree in formal education. In addition to expanding the specific qualifications, the professional life of the future, more and more we need social and communication skills. Those are the ones that make it difference between the human beings and the machines, and this is becoming more and more important. What is interesting is to be flexible, to be able to adapt to new tasks and to new working methods. There are some key qualifications in order to attain this objective. Those skills include digital skills, but also non-digital skills. For example, the capacity to handle machines where there might be failures or shutdowns, or the willingness for lifelong learning. The possibility of offering this training is on the companies, and it should be part of the daily life of companies today. State institutions do not have a mandate, according to the managers, to design those training skills. The state what has to provide is a digital infrastructure. Thirdly, in Germany, it's very unlikely that there will be an increase of unemployment through automation processes. It is true that many professions might change and some others will even disappear. When we talk about the potential for replacement in companies, there is a study from 2015. The authors start from the hypothesis that as a consequence of artificial intelligence, there will be certain jobs that disappear at all levels. They state that this will have an impact on 42% of German jobs, but they don't speak about the disappearance of whole professions. The only risk is on the low skilled workers, which accounts for a very small percentage of German workers. Based on the database of the German Employment Bureau, a study from 2015 from Dengler and Mathens, we've been able to assess the potential for substitutability according to the level of the requirements of the professions. Again, low-skilled workers will be more threatened by automation, but there is also a certain danger for skilled workers or employees with vocational training. Here, the threat is of 45%. The potential for automation depends on the nature of the task. In the field of services, for example, cleaning services, they include non-routinary jobs, so they are not subject to automation, but certain tasks carried out by specialized employees on many occasions will be easily replaced. So for all, it is mandatory to go on with advanced training that will protect the employees and the workers against computing substitution. The potential for substitutability only speaks about the possibility of automation. As we have said, there are also some other factors that could be here very relevant. For example, costs will also be an obstacle, and therefore automation is not always or will not always be carried out or is not going to comply with its full potential. In fact, in the population, they are not thinking about a large-scale loss of jobs due to digitization, or because they also consider that there will be an increase in productivity and there will be therefore an increase in the jobs demands. The surveys from the German population indicate that there is not a fear of losing jobs. through digitalization. If we see the responses according to the level of school education, it is true that people with baccalaureate or secondary education, they 80% of them do not fear of job losses, while those that have just general level of education, they might fear it in a higher percentage, 62%. There is no fear in the management or civil servants or and blue-collar workers only fear on 69%. In the specific case of AIRBUS, there isn't any specific concern among the staff. In fact, the union delegate agrees with this idea. If I now move to the fourth item.
Das eher geringe Substituierbarkeitspotenzial von Berufen in Deutschland schließt nicht aus, dass vereinzelt durch
potential of substitution, which is very scarce in Germany, does not exclude the possibility of losses in jobs through offshoring. Digitalization might enhance offshoring. In the past, this was used in order to look for lower wages, but now digitalization allows for a different type of offshoring, that is the automation of certain activities that until now were carried out abroad. Therefore, the reasons a low wage is no longer a reason to use offshoring.
Verhandlungen aber ein zentrales Ziel der Gewerkschaftsseite.
To guarantee jobs and job centers is still one of the main objectives of the unions. AIRBUS managers, in fact, are against outsourcing of work processes as a consequence of the lack of internal qualifications. They want to sort out this problem through an internal or ongoing and specialized training, and this is their clear objective. The fifth item, social dialogue and the role of social agents
sollten zukünftig spezifisch auf die
in relation to the impact of digitalization was also subject of our study. In the future, collective bargaining and collective bargaining processes should include the needs of companies in this regard. Digitalization will require specific solutions for certain companies. This is a quote from a trade union representative. German white job security is currently more important in collective bargaining than high wage demands. And this is an important change. The security at the job place or workplace. AIRBUS managers consider that collective bargaining will not be enough to tackle digital transformation at a workplace, although they agree that they should be part of collective bargaining in the process. The sixth item we see in AIRBUS in relation to the challenges of digitalization. This is a tool to compensate. The staff needs to feel protected, and also the interest of the company for a greater flexibility as a consequence of transfers abroad and the great diversity of contracts and the geographic independency, the possibility to exercise an influence are very reduced. The affiliates in unions in Germany are decreasing, and this affects the possibility for co-management in the company. The seventh item, in order to adapt to teleworking and the crowdsourcing or digital platforms, and in order to adapt to all of these companies have to make their processes more flexible, which is reflected in new legislation on the work of temporary work companies and teleworking and temporary contracts. The current legislation on the social organization of the company is now going to be amended in order to be adapted to the new challenges about the temporary work through temporary agencies. They are workers that they are not part of the company. They work they work on behalf of other company, but this may alter the work of the unions in the company, and it deprives those workers from many of their co-management rights. Another problem that might require new regulation are on-site contracts. About health protection, digitalization has positive and negative impact. The job in itself could be safer because digitalization eliminates many potential accidents. The union delegates mentioned that yes, health and safety, the workplace could be benefited by digitalization due to a smaller physical burden in performing the job, but there might be other professional illnesses that could emerge, for example, the ongoing connection and some other consequences of digitalization. The ninth point, the impact of digitalization in the levels of income in Germany. About distribution of income are not very clear in Germany. The highly skilled workers will have an increase in their salaries, so they will become the winners of digitalization, and it's very likely, as the manager said, that there will be an increase in the highly qualified staff, but certain jobs will also be carried out by the new technologies, so there are new opportunities for low-skilled workers that might be able to perform their positions aided by digitalization, not only for AIRBUS, and this increase in salaries or potential increase in salaries is subject to a speculation. In Germany, the salary level is subject to collective bargaining, but there might be changes due to the scarcity of the necessary qualification for certain jobs. It's not clear whether this is going to mean a greater gap between the income levels. And the 10th item is not clear yet how far digitalization will have an impact on the gender pay gap. We could think that the new technological possibilities will allow a greater balance, life and work balance, and this could prevent periods of time without contributing to the social security, especially by women. The new working positions, thanks to this new flexibility, on many occasions might be considered as atypical employment with smaller salaries and with a lack of collective representation. Although, on the other hand, professions usually with greater presence of women are not subject to be automatized. They are usually social professions that are not routinary. On the other hand, the presence of women in STEM subjects is still very scarce, and with this we see that there is a limitation on women's access to certain professions that we might think that there will be a wage gap or salary gap between men and women. Digitalization is beneficial for human beings, but it brings about deep changes, and this might give rise to certain concern. Digital transformation is not neutral. It generates winners and losers, and those losers are the ones that need more attention in the social dialogue, not to have a boycott to digitalization, or a rejection to digitalization that is possible. And in this context, I would like to introduce 5 ideas. Even though the strong economy and the high level of exports, but Germany is not a highly digitalized country. The economy in the economy index is in ranking number 12. That means that is in an average type of position in relation to digitalization. This is not due to a lack of human resources in Germany. There isn't a general digital gap in German companies. Only the most senior workers state that they might have difficulties with new technologies. 10% in the age range between 50 and 65 years of age, but 32 of them stated they can use new technologies without a problem. There is a great majority of Germans that share the same opinion, and the same can be said about AIRBUS. But what was present in the interviews was that the dual vocational training system is lagging behind digitalization, and the social agents cooperate with the state in writing the CVs of vocational training, but they have difficulties in imposing their interest to adapt this vocational training process to digitalization. There had been many initiatives, but before that, we need to reform the curriculum at the primary and secondary education level, and there's still much to do.
And it's not only in Germany. I mean, Germany is in a not very positive situation regarding the use of digital technologies in the public sector, actually. And also in companies, the digital infrastructure is insufficient, even in Airbus. Some management representatives, they talk about a catastrophic situation with very obsolete infrastructure. So that's a big hurdle that we find today in German companies. In general terms, it is necessary to adapt a lot of labor legislation, amongst other, the law or the working hours are still the key way to measure a worker's performance, and directly that has an impact on their income. That is a correct assessment and is very important both for employers and workers. And there is currently a limit of 8 hours per day regarding working hours. And there is also a wide range of rules regarding the rest periods of 11 hours rest in between shifts, in between working days. So both employers and trade unions agree that these rules and standards nowadays, they need to be reviewed and adapted to individual circumstances and to be more flexible to be able to make the most out of the potential of digitalization. But of course, the precise answer is still rather controversial. There are other rules, such as the rule of the social organization or a directive on the workplace. An Airbus executive talks about the law on the social organization of the company as an anachronism. And they aren't actually very satisfied with the specific contract per project and for the temporary employment agencies. In Germany, we need to adapt the legislation, and employers and workers have to use their influence so that these necessary reforms are done. It seems that the national or state institutions are hindering digitalization, stopping in digitalization more than anything else. Nowadays, as a consequence of the pandemic, they will accelerate the digitalization, but for us, it feels that this acceleration will be opposed by these institutions, these state institutions. Dear colleagues and friends, I would like to thank you all for your participation and attention and for participation in this project. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we're finished.